Hello, and welcome to Session 2, Workshop 7, Impeach the President's Dream, Dreamers Surviving Freedom Through Literacy, Culturally Relevant Teaching, and Social Justice in Action. If you're enjoying the learning today, you can pay the joy forward by going to the Ed Collab site and finding out how you can donate to Grace Smith House, our adopted charity. Because the Ed Collab gathering is a day of free learning, we invite you to donate what you would have spent on coffee, lunch, or even registration for an amazing day like this. Pay forward to support others. Today, we welcome Dr. Bilal Polson, Erik, Jamal, Sumner, Alicia, Arce-Boardman for their session, Impeach the President's Dream. Dr. Bilal Polson is a principal at Northern Parkway Elementary School in Uniondale, New York. He currently serves as co-director for the Professional Dyads of Culturally Relevant Teaching Project, and he's also the author of an upcoming manuscript published by NCTE and Routledge honoring children towards culturally sustaining early literacy teaching out this summer. Joining Dr. Polson is Erik Jamal Sumner. Erik has been teaching in his beloved community, Uniondale, New York, since the young age of 15. 6 years as a tutor with his mother's school, Success Express Learning Center, 4 years as site coordinator of a free community academic summer camp, and 24 years as an art teacher in Uniondale Public Schools. He's also a graduate of Uniondale, attending kindergarten through 12th grade, seeing the Uniondale school community through academic, social leadership, and technological success is his mission. And Alicia Arce-Boardman is an elementary school teacher in the Uniondale School District in New York. She's been teaching for 11 years, however, has been in the field of early education for 15. She's the co-author of No More Culturally Irrelevant Teaching. Alicia is a strong believer of and advocates for student voice. She continues to learn through her students and their stories. Friends, if you're on Twitter today, you can share your learning using the hashtag #TheEdCollabGathering, a space, and a #7. And now I'm excited to introduce Dr. Bilal Polson, Erik Jamal Sumner, and Alicia Arce-Boardman.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to start off by introducing ourselves and just saying greetings, and then we'll talk about the outline of this talk, and we'll get it going. I am Bilal Polson, the principal of Northern Parkway Elementary School.
And I am Erik Jamal Sumner, art teacher of the great Northern Parkway School.
I am Alicia Arce-Boardman, 4th grade bilingual teacher at Northern Parkway School.
So today, friends, our conversation is Impeach the President's Dream, Dreamers Surviving Freedom Through Literacy, Culturally Relevant Teaching, and Social Justice in Action. We start this off by talking about our school, the vision and the goals of how we operate and how we practice. And then we'll talk about the collaboration of Alicia and Erik, and talking about how this work is really seen and done in action. So we could go to the next slide. So Northern Parkway School is actually 95 years old. We're celebrating our 95th year as a school. It's a pre-K to 5 elementary school, and we have 800 students. The majority of our students are Latinx and students of African descent, and we are so proud that our families are from all over the world and throughout the diaspora. And one of the things that we really talk about and really are proud of is that we honor the language and the culture of all of our families, and that's the center of our practice. And it's really important, and we look to infuse that in all our work and our instruction, and it really informs the work that we do on a daily basis. One of the goal and the vision of our school is that we are founded in culturally relevant teaching. However, our vision and our goal is to work towards sustaining culturally relevant teaching. And that's our aim. So with this, I have the great pleasure of talking about and sharing with you the work of Alicia Arce-Boardman and Erik Jamal Sumner, how it looks on a daily basis, this literacy, social justice work in action every day. Next slide. Or the slide that you have is perfect. So at this point, Erik and Alicia are going to talk about their collaboration and the work that they do together as art teacher and fourth grade teacher. Art teacher. Mm-hmm.
All right. Hello, everybody. How you doing? I'm Erik Sumner. Well, I've been working with students who speak Spanish for many years, and I've been trying to find out ways to communicate best the ideas in terms of wanting them to seek the best out of life, get the best what I have to offer. And oftentimes I've reached out to pick as a form of literacy for them to see things, because we don't always, understand each other through language, but everyone can understand each other through pictures. And so in this particular situation, I chose a picture. It just happened to be at the same time when the school building was celebrating the book awards, and Dreamers came up. And Alicia, she brought the book to me, and we used that book as a way to develop one of the art projects that I was working on with her class, which happens to be found poems. Alicia, you want to talk a little bit about Dreamers?
Sure. So one of the great things about how Erik and I collaborated was that it was really authentic, because it wasn't planned. I just walked in, saw he mentioned the found poems, and I said, well, you have to use this book, because this book talks exactly about what you're doing with them right now. And the kids had already read the book with me in English and in Spanish. So I gave Erik the book. It's a beautiful book that talks about the journey of the Dreamers, and many of my students have made that very long journey from Central America to the United States. So, and just recently, so it was very real for them, and they definitely connected with it. So for them to carry that over to art was absolutely amazing in the work that Erik has done with them.
So the beautiful part about using found poem as a way to communicate with my ESL learners, my ESL students, the idea of a found poem is to take existing text. If we'll go to the next slide. You'll see on the right-hand side, it talks about what a found poem is. And it takes existing texts and refashions them and reorders them and presents them as poems. The literary equivalent of a collage poetry found poetry is often made from newspaper articles, street signs, graffiti, speeches, letters, or even poems. As you'll see, I highlighted some of the words in that text. And that is actually what a found poem does. It takes pieces of a piece of writing and pulls out something that creates new meaning. Now, the reason why I use found poems in this situation is because oftentimes our students are coming from other countries and they don't understand what's going on around them, and therefore they have to try to make meaning from where they are. And they have to pull a little something from here, pull a little something from there. And hopefully it'll make them feel more at home, or try to make where they currently are their home and feel good about that. So you'll see I have highlighted take, refashion, reorder, and present as equivalent, and try often. And that's almost, to me, what it might feel for a young student in the fourth to look for success. And then under that piece, it talks about how the writer Annie Dillard has said that turning a text into a poem doubles the poem's context. And quote, it says, the original meaning remains intact, meaning in my interpretation, the child remains intact. Where they are from, that stays intact. They have to keep where they're from. They have to keep their language. They have to keep their culture. And continue on, it says, but now it swings between two poles. And that's what the children, the ESL students, have to understand. And I want them to understand that. I don't want them to switch over and become completely American. I don't want them to try to be something that they're not. I want them to be able to go between wherever they go, where English speakers are and where Spanish speakers are. I want to be able to switch both ways. And I found that to be hopefully very meaningful to the students. So we took, if you'll go to the next slide. So I asked the students and many of my other students from other classes to give me some words. And they threw out a lot of words based on that picture from, I believe, the slide 4. And the picture was detailing a Hispanic woman who is in a chair, and seemingly a lot of grieving. And there's a flag next to them. And it seems like a lot of pain is going on. And this is all part of the migrant movement from South America. So they don't always have words that I understand, and my words they don't always understand, but I always believe that when you just put out what you know, things are gonna, work its way out. So we gave the English words, and I realized that the kids were struggling a little bit. And so I asked Alicia, can you please help me with this? And so she said, sure, no problem. Very accommodating, loving, fantastic. And she translated the words. And some of the words didn't translate, or she left some of them in English. And so the kids, I handed out all those papers to the children. They were like seemingly almost like 100 pieces of paper. And they all, like a puzzle, they searched through all of these words. And I told them to take the translations. You'll see in the second part of the slide, you'll see how the words are translated. I said, take from these words and write some type of poem that makes sense to you based on the image that I'm showing you. And so you'll see on the third part of this slide, it talks about a child who wrote, the children get happy, family get children, children don't get the hurt, and people very sad and hungry. So you can see to some extent the language is evolving. And because found poems don't necessarily have to follow any particular model of grammar, again, it helps them express themselves through just piecing words together. So if you'll switch to the next slide. So these are the pieces that evolved from the rough draft that I showed you in the previous slide. We used paint. The background of that came from an example from an abstract expressionist artist. And we studied that abstract expressionist artist, and they came up with different ideas from that piece. And then we took the words that they came up with from their poems, and we cut them out as found poem art usually is, and we glued them on, and we added, color and vibrancy, and that's what we have. I hope you enjoy the pictures that the children created. Alicia, if you want to add to that, you might.
Yes. So one of the greatest things about this art was that when Erik and I sat down and he showed me all the poems and the paintings, and I said to him, we talked about it, I said, well, that makes sense because that's that child's story. That makes sense. This happened to that child. So that's why the words that they chose, that's why they chose those words. It almost, knowing their stories brought context to their poems. And I loved how we were able to sit and really just talk about that and bring the poems to life. They were so proud of their work, but there was just another way for them to share their stories.
So if you look at some of the titles, if you're paying attention to some of the titles, on slide 4, the title was Woke Dreamers. Woke is a pretty popular word these days in terms of social understanding of what's going on in the world around us. And then following that one is Found in Translation, which is a play off of Lost in Translation. So again, when we have our migrant students come here, they are lost many times trying to find their way around this new place. But again, in my classroom, I do my best. I don't speak Spanish, but I do my best to try to figure out how we can communicate with each other. And then the following slide, it talks about how we find ourselves by communicating through images, through art. And again, the title to that is Found Art and Dream of Surviving Freedom. So very quickly, the idea of surviving freedom came from one of the phrases that kids came up with. So I thought that was just absolutely mind-blowing, the idea of surviving freedom. They come here, families come here to have freedom, but at the same time, they have so much struggle and strife, especially during this time. And that's where the title comes from, the idea of impeaching the president's dream. our students, along with all of their supporters, have to make sure that they survive in this situation that they're currently in. Alicia, if you want to add to that, Bilal, anyone?
Nope, sounds good. You think you captured it. Thank you.
All right, so after we finished working on those pieces, we came into Black History Month. And in Black History Month, our whole school decided to focus on the Harlem Renaissance. Now, the interesting part of the Renaissance, I honestly believe that we are all in that stage right now in America. We are going through a serious Renaissance, and it was perfect that we chose that topic. As an artist, I focused on Aaron Douglas. Now, the whole story behind us bringing up Aaron Douglas and the murals that you see on the screen right now is absolutely unbelievable, but I don't think I have time to explain the whole thing. But the fourth graders, the short version of it is the fourth graders asked me to help them put together a mural. Me being extremely busy often, I didn't have enough time, and the fourth graders made sure I had enough time, and they covered me whenever I needed that covering, which was 90% of the time. And they got the murals up on the wall. Now, the choice of the pieces, they're copies off of Aaron Douglas's artwork. And the very first one, which is all the way to the left, that one is called Into Bondage. Now, Into Bondage, the focus on that one is about coming to America and through whatever strife and struggle they had to get here in. And then looking up, you'll see the person you can see him looking up at the North Star and seeing that there is hope, even in the situation that they're in. And I find that something in that equates to what many of our dreamers are going through right now. And the second one, you'll see with the star, that one's called Aspects of Negro Life. And that one details the idea of knowing that when you're here in America, wherever space that you land, that you have to do your best and reach the top. And that's why the individual is pointing up toward the future, futuristic building. And the last one is called Judgment Day. And that pretty much details the idea that all supporters of the dreamer, we will be judged. The teachers, the community will be judged in the end of how much we gave to our students and their families while here and learning how to, again, survive freedom. And it became just wonderful project. They call it triptych when you put three pieces together. And it was a wonderful collaboration with the fourth grade, and I just couldn't ask for more, couldn't say enough about it. It was absolutely fantastic. Had a great time, and thank you.
So along with that, what we did was I teach fourth grade in our school is departmentalized. So I have the fourth grade social studies. So I see three different groups of students for social studies, and we focused on Aaron Douglas during the month of February while we were doing the artwork. We would spend a lot of time painting, but the kids also got a chance to, at the end when the paintings were finally done, they had a chance to think about words that describe the pictures as they were learning about Aaron Douglas and the paintings. And then we posted their words on the sides, on the borders of the paintings, and the murals are there in our blue, what we call our blue wing. The kids really had such an amazing time learning and just collaborating with one another and with Mr. Sumner. So it really was an awesome experience, especially because us as fourth grade teachers didn't really have an artistic eye that Mr. Sumner did. But it was definitely amazing. The kids had a great time with it, learning about him, learning about the different paintings, and not just these paintings. They picked which paintings they wanted to do, and the work was really from them. So it was an awesome experience.
So Alicia and Erik, what I just want to add to that is that the whole idea of February and Black History Month, as a school, we're always looking to operate from this place that African heritage is really the heritage of humanity. So it's the heritage and the history of the whole school. However, with that saying, we still took advantage of February being that month to celebrate. So we looked at it as a birthday, in a sense, a birthday celebration. So though we celebrate our lives every day, we were taking February as an opportunity, as a launching pad to do that work as a collective. One of the things that we're also proud of as a school community is that this was the second year that we were inspired for our theme for African Heritage Month, Black History Month, by one of our parents. It was actually this idea came from our PTA president, Mrs. Bailey, Stephanie Bailey, to say, hey, can our children learn more about the Harlem Renaissance? So what happened was that each grade level, from pre-K to fifth grade, all took on a different segment. So they talked about fourth grade, third grade, and second grade, both talked about writers. Second grade, we looked at the male writers, and then third grade, fifth grade took third grade talked about female writers, and so we looked at the whole Harlem Renaissance from different aspects, from art to music. Kindergarten celebrated the musicians. First grade really focused on Satchmo, Louis Armstrong, etc. So this was just another example of how this work that we strive to do every day came to life, particularly in this month of February. We can go to the next slide.
So probably around the month, in the middle of January, my students really started getting into activism, being activists. It started around Martin Luther King because we talked about the fact that they know a lot about Martin Luther King. They've been learning about him for, since their whole elementary career. However, I wanted them to learn about other activists. So we had this book was actually on my shelf, and one of the students wanted to read it. So we read it, and they were just not convinced that them as children could be activists. So we went over what an activist is. We talked about different topics that they might be interested in, that they may be passionate about, and it took a little prompting. So we did a little bit more research. I introduced them to the 30 under 30, and I printed out a picture of each of the activists and their cause. So I taped those all around the room, and we spent 3 or 4 days. They just learned about each one of them. They just picked a few that they really wanted to focus on, and they learned about their cause, and they learned about why it would have been important. So I introduced them to these sentence stems are up in my room, and they've been up in my room since we talked about Columbus Day and Indigenous People Day, because I wanted them to be able to have discussions with one another using meaningful language. So they use this when they're speaking, and they use it when they're in their writing. So the sentence stems have been up there all year. They've used it for several different projects that we've done. So once they read as much as they could about the different activists, then they just chose one that they were really passionate about, that they really seemed to connect with. You can go to the next slide. And they spent time learning more about, not just about that person, but about their cause and why it was important. So they talked about the Flint water crisis. They talked about climate change, talked about gun control. Anything that they seemed to really connect with, that's what they focused on. After they chose whatever their cause was, whatever their claim was, that's when I took time and looked for research on their grade level in the 2 languages, videos. I just spent a lot of time printing out articles, compiling videos that they can watch on their iPads, purchasing books, just so they had as much research as possible. So 2 of my students who were really interested in learning about the Flint water crisis did a lot more research on, they wanted to not only to know about the Flint water crisis, but also about the importance of the not having clean water and why clean water is so important. They also did research on. They also did. Sorry, they also did research on. Sorry. And how much it would cost them if, God forbid, something like this would happen to them. So this project actually took about 6 weeks because they really got so into it. Once they were pretty much set on what they were working on, what cause they were working on, they started looking at other activists that may have joined in on this particular claim, either in the past or in the future. Some students started to work on how they, and then the next step was for them to work on how they could help the cause. So emailing, writing letters to politicians, to newspapers, on how to get the word out for their cause. You can go to the next slide. So this was just the final pieces of their writing, and their final pieces were probably finished about 2.5 weeks ago. And they are still really passionate about their work. I have students that are still, particularly my 2 girls who really started learning a lot about the Flint water crisis, who will go home and print out things. And one girl wrote to the news channels as to why this isn't even in the news anymore, the Flint still doesn't have clean water. So I learned a lot from them also. But it's definitely something that's still in their minds, and it definitely just goes into everything else that we've been doing for the rest of the year. So one of the things I really try to do when I'm teaching is to have the curriculum come from them. And this is just a huge example of that, because this was not something that was planned, but it's just something that came about through their conversations and their interest. And I just wanted them to know what an impact they could make through sharing their stories and using their voices.
So, Erik and Alicia, I want you to talk a little bit with our friends today about how do you prepare lessons like this in terms of preparing lesson by lesson? Do you have a vision for it to be a unit? And how long does that process actually take? Erik, you could start.
Well, because I'm an artist, I create my lessons very differently. Well, I can't say differently. I just do it. I don't follow a format. I follow my heart. So at the beginning of the school year, I put together a lot of different ideas, artists, themes, because we are a social justice school. And one of the things that popped up was abstract expressionism. And that's when we started in, I think it was December. And the lady that we focused on, she just put a lot of colors and all over her canvases, and the students were like, what is that? And I told them, well, actually, that painting that you're looking at went for like $14 million. And they're like, oh my gosh, So I try to get them comfortable with the idea of allowing the freedom to just create and put something on paper. And so they're not confined to making work that looks like a photograph. So once I try to get them to, relax, with their art, I try to throw in the other themes. And I think the idea of finding yourself is important in my classroom. It's not so much how talented and gifted they are in creating art, but finding out who they are and me paying attention to each individual student. So again, with some of the, this particular year, we had a lot of students in my 4th grade ESL group that did not speak English that well. And they were just, for whatever reason, they kept coming in. And so one would come in, 2, then 3. And I was just like, we got a lot of kids in here who don't understand what I'm talking about. And, some of the classmates would try to help them out. And And so throughout all of that, I'm paying attention. I'm jotting down notes. And I'm putting pieces together. I'm grabbing something here, grabbing from something there, and eventually it becomes. And that's my lesson plan. My plan is to just take pieces from here and there and watch how each day, evolves. And that is what I pick from. In the previous year, I've done a found art piece before with my fourth grade ESL students, and it went over very well. It was a little different, a lot different from this one, but again, this one involved a lot more color, and it was based off of a abstract expressionist artist as well. But in terms of how it continues to evolve, again, I needed help with the translations, and so that's when I reached out to Alicia, and Alicia, she's like, okay, I got you, everything's cool. And again, it's just an evolving piece, and it's like a piece of art with me. Creating a lesson plan is a piece of art, and the words, I have to say, just every single time I look at some of the art pieces. If you get a chance to look at slide number 6, if you can read some of them, they're in English and they're in Spanish, and one of them says sleepy and uncomfortable, millions surviving, hungry family, alive women. And another one, which really blew me over. Oh, okay, I'm sorry about that. This one was a piece when the kid put together the idea of worshiping and humiliation, and I thought the two combinations of those words were absolutely mind blowing. The idea that when you have to move thousands of miles by foot. I'm a marathon runner. Haven't run one in a long time, but as a marathon runner, you go through all types of emotions, and worrying about what you look like is the least of your worries. You're trying to finish. You're trying to get to the end point, and their end point is not just getting to America, but being successful in America. And so, what Jordans you wear, what name brand clothes you have, that's not an issue. I could imagine that they could care less what other kids talking about. Kids can be mean. We're not worried about that. They're not worried about that. They're trying to get to the end result. So the idea of worshiping, the idea of being, I guess, humble, and the idea of people humiliating you sometimes because of where you come from or what you do or don't have, those two words really knocked me off my feet. So again, the idea of creating my lesson, it comes from paying attention to the students and what they do. And I'm sure that looking at this particular project is going to turn into something else. So that's how my lesson plans evolve and come together.
So, Erik, thank you for that. So you're saying that the students actually inform your thinking to prepare for your lessons. And then also you stated as lesson plans as art. So those are two major takeaways that I know I'm going to keep with me. Alicia, tell us about your process.
So I'm really grateful to work at a school that gives me the autonomy to kind of build the curriculum as I go. So I could have something planned and it's going to go completely differently than I anticipated. That activist writing started as something completely different. I had different activists that I wanted the students to learn about, but they just weren't moving past the fact that children couldn't do anything. Their voices didn't matter. And one of the major quotes in my room, in my classroom, that's up on my by my wall, is that stories matter. Many stories matter. And I wanted them to be sure that they understood that their stories matter. Mm-hmm. That being said, that activist writing that lesson plan was not written for that day, but it just evolved from our conversations. We always start with we have conversations. We start with they bring books, they bring articles, all that stems from questions that they have. And I think that once I became comfortable with allowing for myself to maybe not have all the answers and for them to have the answers, then that became a lot easier for me to just kind of relinquish a little bit of the control and allow me to really be a facilitator while they guided the learning. And I really, truly did become a facilitator. I truly did become a learner with them. And I tell them all the time, I'm learning from you. Spanish is my native language. However, there's many times the students will correct my Spanish because I said something that was incorrect or I spelled something incorrectly. And I'm at the point where I'm comfortable with that. And they love that I do that I allow them to be the teachers for that moment. I want to always have my students in my classroom feel like their voices matter, feel like their stories matter, that their families matter, and that them as human beings matter. If they get that, if they walk away from my room, from being with me, knowing that they matter, knowing that the voices and their stories, that they can be activists, that they can be upstanders, then I have done my job.
So, Alicia, that was also, tremendously powerful. Some of the things I heard you say was you talked about how, your students, your scholars' stories, they mattered. And actually, it started with conversations. And then you also mentioned that they really come with a lot of resources and materials. So both of you talked about how your teaching actually is informed by your students, and both of you are allowing for them to bring to the conversation to actually shape the curriculum, shape the teaching, shape the learning. How did the two of you come to that understanding? Erik, could you start?
I mean, I was raised in education. My mom's a teacher, and she's always had me by her side. Like I said, I was mentioned in the beginning, I've been doing some form of tutoring or teaching since the age of 15. So, and that's pretty much always been in my community. So I have a great love for my community and the people who come from there. And just being a Black man in America and understanding the struggle that goes along with that, it creates a passion in you. It creates a passion in me. And also being from the hip hop generation and listening to hip hop and music, it also fuels that energy. And so when I stand in front of my kids, my students, sometimes I get extremely passionate. They look at me, their eyes bulge out, I'm like, whoa. But again, it's all about the love. It's about the love of the community. It's about the love of my people. And my people, is everybody. Especially when I look at the future, my students, that means the most to me. So that's how I evolved and created my way of my form of teaching, and passion is really what drives me most.
Alicia?
I think that I just had to shift my thinking and shift my mindset from that deficit mindset and that this idea that teaching was this top-down authoritative process. And it took a lot of time because I think that, as a teacher, it was hard for me to relinquish that control in the classroom. It was all about me having that control and that power. And I had to really just shift my thinking and shift my mindset and relinquish and knew that my end goal was that the students were successful. And how they got there was important. How that top-down process, that me being the center lecturing, was not conducive to the students, to any students. So for me to really just had to be self-reflective and know that the change had to come with me and not the children. So once I put it on me and I was able to relinquish that control and allow the students to be facilitators and me to just guide them in their learning, the end goal was I was able to see that end goal, see the students be successful, and also know what the goals were. My goals were for students to write, for students to read, and they were writing and they were reading, and they were enjoying it. So I just had to shift my thinking.
So, Erik and then Alicia, we all know that our work within the foundation of culturally relevant pedagogy is informed by the great Gloria Lansing Billings, and one of the principles and tenets she talks about is academic achievement. Can you just give one example in your work with your children, Erik, how the students are able to showcase their academic excellence? And then Alicia, can you do that as well?
Well, in terms as an art teacher, I'm going to include that visual art as a form of academics, of course. I mean, we present our students' work in art shows, but mostly presenting the artwork to their classmates. That's what I can clearly see. They're very proud of the work that they create. It is a struggle. Visual art, creative visual art is a struggle for a lot of people. And I always tell them, you know, when they get upset about what their first line looks like on a piece of paper, or halfway through they're not happy with their work, I always tell them, you know, no one likes frozen hamburgers, you know, but after it's done, it's very delicious. So I tell them to follow through, wait till you get to the end, then, you know, comment on your work. And usually, you know, if they do that, they trust me. They blow their own minds and they're like, "Ooh, look what I made! Look what I made!" So, you know, that excellence comes with hard work for a lot of the students, because there are few that are gifted, but everybody knows that when you work hard, it matters more than the gifts that you were given. So that's how, you know, my students produce and show off their excellence in our art academics.
Thank you. Alicia, you're going to have us close out?
So I think that academic excellence just looks different for each student. So each student's going to be successful in a different way. And I just see them in their own goals and their own successes differently. And for me, that's what academic excellence is. For one student, it may be writing an essay. For another student, it may be opening the book and putting their name on a piece of paper. And I'm okay with that. As long as they feel accomplished, their success is going to look differently from someone else's. And as long as I make sure they understand that.
So the Ed Collab community and friends and family, we hope that you enjoyed this journey with us as we talked about impeaching the president's dream, our dreamers surviving freedom through literacy, culturally relevant teaching, and social justice in action. We really just wanted to bring you into the world of Northern Parkway School on how we do this work on a daily basis, working towards this whole idea of how to culturally sustain relevancy for our children. Thank you.
All right.
Oh my gosh. Thank you three so much for creating the space for these ideas and these important conversations. The last 45 minutes, you were always speaking to my heart and my mind. And based on what I see on Twitter, the audience agrees with me. It gives me a lot of hope knowing that educators like you all are doing this work and moving us all forward. So thank you so much for all that you're doing for kids and for our field. So audience, if you're watching, if you joined us late or you popped in and out, you can watch the whole video in its entirety. It will be archived on the Ed Collab site. But as the session goes to a close, you can be sure to get up, stretch, get ready for session 3, which starts at 1 o'clock in about 12 minutes. I'm going to preview those sessions quickly. Here we go. Bear with me for a second. All right, so session 3. All right, here we are. Take a look at these amazing presenters coming up at 1 o'clock. We have 3 sessions going. We're excited to kick off with those presenters in about 10 minutes. So again, team, thank you for your work today. It was a pleasure listening to you and learning and growing with you today.
And thank you, everybody who tweeted out to us. We appreciate you very much.
All right, we'll say bye.
Thank you.
Okay,
bye-bye.
bye-bye.